From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo. This is From the South. We start in Colombia today, where residents living near the Santander Police School are paying tribute to the victims of Thursday's bomb attack. Dozens of white flowers have been placed near the police academy. At least 21 people were killed and 68 wounded in the incident. Neighbors are recalling the attack and the fear they felt as windows broke around them from the blast.
I was preparing something to eat when I thought the house was coming down, and at my age, it's very scary. I just started to feel glass falling, and I ran to a column thinking the house was going to fall. It was very hard.
Already from the third floor of my house, you could see the cloud of smoke coming from the bomb, but we didn't know where it was. If it was here at the school, the station, the shopping center, or at the transit stop. We didn't know anything until half an hour later when it started to be known that it was a car bomb.
And investigations continue to determine the motives behind the attack. The Attorney General and the Defense Minister said that one suspect was arrested during the early morning hours. The government has also accused the National Liberation Army for the attack. The group has yet to make a statement, but has unofficially denied that it ordered the attack. Meanwhile, the United Nations has urged Colombia to clarify the attack and bring those responsible to justice. The Secretary General Antonio Guterres has sent his condolences to the relatives of the 21 victims. The UN office in Colombia described the attack as, quote, an unacceptable criminal act, which goes against the efforts the country is making to steer away from violence. And different movements and human rights organizations in the country are making a call for Colombians to keep working for peace.
This attack, as well as all the murders and threats that many leaders in the country have been suffering for the last 2 years, is an attack to peace. We call on all Colombians not to lose hope, nor their interest in the building of peace, because we have the right to live in a new country.
And President Iván Duque has declared 3 days of national mourning. He also announced that he ordered tighter control over Colombian borders, as well as over access points to several cities. Following the bomb attack in Bogotá, Colombian students and other social movements suspended their planned protest. The students had called their march to demand the dismantling of the ESMAD Right Squad. They accuse it of using extreme violence against student demonstrations last year. They also want more funding for universities. Other movements are calling for the resignation of the Attorney General. Dozens of migrants part of the caravan traveling to the U.S. have been treated for dehydration and sunstrokes. Migrants are enduring temperatures of 32 degrees Celsius, a lack of food and water as they travel to reach the border. The migrants say they are heading to the U.S. to escape violence and poverty in their home countries.
Up until now, we've treated 3 people, 2 adults and 1 minor. The prognosis is mostly sunstroke and lack of food. That's what we've seen most here.
And the United Nations has praised Mexico's new immigration policy, which will allow Central American migrants to obtain humanitarian visas valid for a 1-year period.
Allowing them to regularize their stay and open the road for them to receive humanitarian visas or visas for work in Mexico. Then yes, that's a very different route from what we have seen in the past, and we welcome it. For many years, the Mexican government's immigration policy worked as an outsourcing of U.S. policy, and obviously there were many bad experiences.
Our correspondent Mario Rosales from Guatemala City has the details.
Saludos, actualizamos a esta hora la información.
The majority of members of the latest migrant caravan began arriving in Mexico late Thursday evening into Friday morning. Hundreds of Hondurans who are part of the group crossed the Guatemalan and Mexican border near the town of Tecunuman. That's in the eastern department of San Marcos. They then continued onto the Mexican city of Ciudad Hidalgo in the state of Chiapas. Mexican authorities have welcomed the migrant caravan. This is in stark contrast to the Enrique Peña Nieto-led administration, which showed great hostility towards the caravan that arrived last October. The administration of Andrés Manuel López Obrador, on the other hand, has facilitated the integration of migrants. They have begun issuing documents, identification papers, medical aid, and other social benefits to these people. With this, migrants can also apply for jobs or seek asylum in Mexico. These temporary papers allow them to stay in the country for a year. While here in Guatemala, smaller groups, comprising many families, keep filtering in from Honduras. This is in the wake of the arrival of the latest migrant caravans arrival in Mexico.
Acá en Guatemala siguen llegando pequeños grupos a la casa.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. Officials from the U.S. Justice Department are in Quito to interview 6 Ecuadorian diplomats about WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange's visitors during his time at the country's embassy in London. The investigators are looking into reports that Assange met with President Donald Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, during the 2016 presidential campaign. Manafort, Assange, and Ecuadorian officials have all denied the claims. Officials in Mexico say that since December, at least 435 people have been detained in the fight against oil theft, led by President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. The Deputy Attorney of Regional Control, Roberto Ochoa Romero, says between December 1st and January 16th, the public ministry opened more than 1,800 investigations. He says 165 people are facing charges, while 45 others are in prison. Ochoa also added that more than 1,000 thefts have been identified and some 4 million liters of various fuels have been seized. The number of disappeared in Mexico is now more than 40,000, and the number of unidentified dead is more than 36,000. This is according to Roberto Cabrera, leader of the National Search Commission. Cabrera made the announcement as he resigned from the position. The commission was created a year ago along with a new database called the National Registry of Missing and Non-Located Persons. It contains digital records of the victims, including their full names, photographs, and fingerprints. Salvadorians have marked 27 years since a peace agreement was signed in Mexico, ending its long-lasting civil war.
Hundreds of Salvadorans attended the commemoration of the signing of the peace deal that ended 12 years of armed conflict in the country, which left thousands dead and missing. Diplomats from countries that supported the peace negotiations also attended the event.
That day, on January 16, 1992, we ended decades of repression and pain. We left behind an era marked by a cruel dictatorship that sought to silence people with violent and inhumane methods. Today, we honor the legacy of the peace pact that allows us to enjoy a better today and look into the future with both hope and optimism.
The celebration was meant to reaffirm the commitment of all Salvadorans to democracy, peace, progress, and development.
We already have the guarantee for people to fully exercise their rights, the freedom to have opinions, to decide, to organize, to build any project. This is important for the thousands who fought and died for these values. They didn't die for nothing, and it is for coming generations who aspire to build a more democratic future.
In a festive mood, songs were performed in honor of the peace achieved 27 years ago, and they celebrated the creation of a new, more advanced democracy.
To become a country that is permanently built on democratic values. That is what we, Salvadoran people, wish from the depths of our hearts. We are people who suffered a lot to build democracy. It cost us 100,000 lives and the destruction of the productive infrastructure of the country.
With the support of the United Nations, many sectors of Salvadoran society seek to bring a second generation of agreements that will tackle the new economic and social challenges the country is currently facing.
Social organizations in Chile have called for a march on January 27th to reject the recent approval of a bill that regulates the country's immigration policy. Promoted by the government of Sebastián Piñera, the project controls arrival and residence, as well as the departure of foreign citizens. Social organizations warn that the project does not solve the needs of the migrant population. They say it increases inequality and slows the process of migrants' integration. Dozens of fishing industry workers in Chile have marched to the presidential palace to protest against a bill that restricts the fishing of cuttlefish. The workers are worried that the new law will take away the livelihood and make it impossible for them to provide for their families. The bill that was recently approved in Congress prohibits trolling.
They are taking away the quota of cuttlefish, and many people are going to stay unemployed. That's why we're here, so that they listen to us. Because the president has done something alone without consulting us. This is the only way for us to be heard.
Puerto Ricans protested against the deal created by the government to tackle the island's growing public debt.
Hundreds of people gathered in front of the federal court, which prompted police to close a section of the Chardin Avenue. Spokespeople for various social organizations present at the event hailed the demonstration as a success.
What the United States is doing to Puerto Rico is too intense. It is just too much when we face debt, a fiscal control board, and the whole federal court. We look at the damage it will cause if what they propose is carried out. We have had 40 years to pay debt, and it will definitely eliminate the possibility of Puerto Rico becoming a free and sovereign nation.
Was the federal judge responsible for restructuring the Puerto Rico debt evaluated whether they would ratify the agreement between the government and COFINA creditors, protesters outside the court condemned the deal and its consequences for the people of Puerto Rico.
This is real resistance, in which one action comes after another. People are seeing their family and friends on the street protesting for the first time. People are waking up to how the deeds of the junta and the colonial system have affected their lives, pockets, and future opportunities.
This clearly shows how what is happening in the country is completely ignored. There is misinformation. More than 200,000 people are affected by these agreements. All sectors are going to be harmed. Teachers, students, the police.
Independence activist Salvador Tio has strongly criticized the U.S. measures against Puerto Rico. He says there's a hidden geopolitical interest for controlling other Caribbean regions and Latin America, especially Venezuela.
Puerto Rico is realizing that colonialism impoverishes you. They say that there is a dictatorship in Venezuela, even though the president was elected by a majority of 4 million. Here, there is a fiscal control board that is deciding the next 40 to 50 years of pensions, universities and schools that nobody voted for. Which one is the dictatorship? It's a dictatorship of the United States. And that's why what's happening is important for Venezuela, aside from us being Latino brothers, as with the Cubans and Dominicans. The United States is setting foot in the Caribbean, into Puerto Rico, so that they can have a frontier from which they can prepare troops to overthrow the elected and constitutional government of Nicolas Maduro.
As part of the demonstration, civic, political and social organizations prepared pamphlets to explain how these agreements about the Puerto Rico debt are designed to benefit the United States and the members of Fiscal Control Board.
Guyana's opposition leader says that the Electoral Commission is being influenced by the government in a bid to stall preparations for a general election. Bharat Jagdeo says the commission could be using delayed tactics as it is yet to issue an official statement about its readiness for early polls. In a surprise defeat last month, Guyana's parliament voted in favor of a no-confidence motion in the government, triggering fresh general elections in March. The National Museum of Brazil in Rio de Janeiro has launched its first exhibition since the devastating fire in September. The exhibition on new discoveries in Antarctica is being held at the original site of the National Museum. It features 160 pieces of Antarctic rocks and fossils, including pieces that were salvaged from the fire. September's fire destroyed the vast majority of the over 20 million objects at the museum. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. The White House says U.S. President Donald Trump will meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un next month. The two are expected to continue talks over the North's nuclear program and U.S. sanctions. The exact date and location have not been announced, but a tweet from the official White House account said Trump is, quote, looking forward to a second summit with Chairman Kim. Meanwhile, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres is urging the two countries to agree on a roadmap for serious talks about denuclearization. The UN chief also asked the U.S. to stop blocking aid organizations from delivering humanitarian aid to North Korea.
And I believe that the PRK has already accepted that the objective of the negotiation, a central objective of negotiation, would be the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. So we encourage both countries to move on with the negotiations. I think we need a clear roadmap, as I said, to clarify things and to allow to know exactly what the next steps will be and to have predictability in the way negotiations take place.
The Lebanese foreign minister has called on the Arab League to readmit Syria into the group. This comes just a day ahead of the Arab Economic and Social Development Summit in Beirut. Syria's membership in the 22-member Arab League was revoked in 2011 over its response to anti-government protests.
Today, Lebanon has proposed the return of Syria to the Arab League. This is not an issue that one country can rule on. This topic needs its own mechanisms and formulations. However, it is not possible for us to ignore this issue and stay away from dealing with it. We would like to fill what we have called the gap in our Arab world, so that this gap will not widen.
And still in Lebanon, a winter storm has ravaged several houses in Beirut. The southern suburbs were hit the hardest. Flood waters entered homes, destroyed furniture, and leaving residents devastated. They say authorities are not doing enough to protect them.
Every year, water enters our home, and no one cares about us. Not the officials, the state, no one. They come, they take a look, and they leave. It's the same disaster every year.
Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko has told his Zimbabwean counterpart that the hard times for Zimbabwe is facing are temporary. Zimbabwe's President Emerson Mnangagwa was received in the Belarus capital Minsk on Thursday. President Lukashenko said the problems the African country is going through were inevitable and that every country faces them when they are trying to reform its economy. Zimbabwe's recent economic hardships sparked violent protests on Monday while the president was abroad.
Mr. President, your country is going through hard times, but I want to point out that these hard times is what we experienced as well more than 20 years ago. Every country that tries to reform, enhance, and build its economy and society goes through this difficult stage.
The government of the Democratic Republic of Congo has rejected a call by the African Union to suspend results from December's elections. Our correspondent in Pretoria has more.
The Southern African Development Community leaders have met on Thursday in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, to try and find a political solution for DRC, or the Democratic Republic of Congo, after the December 30th election. South Africa will be one of the member states attending that meeting, and they have made it clear that they will support a call for a recount of that vote. And this was also a call that was made by opposition candidate Martin Fayulu to court, and it's now sitting in front of a bench of 9 judges, and they are yet to make a pronouncement on that call. Now, this election was supposed to have been a first transition of democracy since Joseph Kabila took over from his father. But now, if there is a delay of a government in Kinshasa, many challenges that that country already face will deepen. These are challenges like the Ebola outbreak, which we now know that it has been the second biggest in history. And there's also fighting of militia in North Kivu and in the northern part regions of that country. Now all eyes will be on Ethiopia, or that meeting that's taking place in Addis Ababa for a permanent solution for the people of the DRC. It's back to you.
We thank Matua for that report. This month marks the 10th anniversary of the Gaza War, an offensive launched by Israel that killed more than 1,400 Palestinians. Also known as Operation Cast Lead, the 22-day military assault on the Gaza Strip was carried out by air, sea, and land. According to human rights organizations, 308 miners were killed in the attack. More than 5,000 people were also wounded. These organizations also found evidence that this was a deliberate military offensive targeting more than 2 million Palestinians. Our correspondent in the Middle East, Nayara Tardo, has the details.
New attacks were reported in the Gaza Strip by Israel against the boats of Palestinian fishermen. It was also reported that Israeli bulldozers approached the city of Rafah. Local media says that this is happening on the same day that the Great March of Return started in the border with Israel, joined by hundreds of Palestinians protesting against the Israeli occupation of their territories. Fishermen and farmers have denounced that this attack against them is affecting the agriculture sector in Gaza and the lives and development of the residents. Today's the Great March of Return coincides with the 10th anniversary of the Gaza War that was launched by Israel on December 27, 2008, and ended 22 days later, on January 18, 2009, one of the deadliest attacks to the Gaza Strip, leaving more than 1,400 Palestinians dead, most of them civilians.
We thank Nayara for that report. And now to the UK. Theresa May's government is still in deep crisis despite surviving Wednesday's no confidence vote. Our correspondent, Pablo Navarrete, has more.
The ayes to the right, 306.
This Wednesday, British Prime Minister Theresa May narrowly won a motion of no confidence, which took place one day after the rejection by Parliament of her government's Brexit agreement with the European Union. In normal circumstances, May's defeat by 230 votes, the greatest loss in British history, would have resulted in her resigning and a general election being called. But the prospect of Jeremy Corbyn, the socialist leader of the Labour Party, as the UK's next Prime Minister, has caused concern in the British establishment.
I think there is a very high chance that if we go to a general election, Jeremy Corbyn would be in number 10 at the end of that. And that is precisely also why I think that the British establishment is very much against a general election, why the government currently is very much against a general election, and why ultimately a lot of members of Parliament, possibly even inside of the Labour Party, are against a general election.
Sectors within the Labour Party, including a significant number of MPs, have been accused of subverting Corbyn's leadership. When he first became Labour leader, the media and the political right often painted him as inept and buffoonish. Now he is more often than not portrayed as a dangerous extremist.
What they did was massively underestimate the political alienation of the population at large and how ready and waiting they were, essentially, for a committed politician that would represent their interests.
In the current political conjuncture, Corbyn is in a difficult position. A section of his supporters voted to leave the EU, while another influential group voted to remain and are now demanding that Corbyn call a second Brexit referendum.
Ordinary people in this country don't really understand what Brexit represents and what it involves, partly because the elites in this country and the so-called political experts in this country have very little understanding of what's happening and what's going to happen. It's just very, very unclear.
The uncertainty surrounding Brexit and the profound political crisis in which the Theresa May government finds itself means there is a generalised sense of unease amongst the population as to what the future will hold. Pablo Navarrete, Telesur, London.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.